night, and my baby's nowhere around. Well, I listen so hard to hear.
Hi, this is Art Fein, Art Fein's Poker Party, coming to you from Hollywood with some... Hey, who's this? It's Jesse. Pretty corny, I know. Okay, hi, Jesse. See you later. That's daughter Jessie. She's getting old. She's going to be 12 soon. And I hope to get a lot older. I'll explain that in a minute. On the far left, on the way in, we heard Johnny Guitar Watson, 3 hours past midnight. It wasn't 2, it wasn't 4, it was 3.
Yes, it was 3 hours past midnight.
And one of Frank Zappa's favorite songs, and maybe his favorite song, right?
He said if he had to be on a desert island with one record.
That makes it a favorite song, I think.
It was a popular time for blues. You know, B.B. King did the 3 o'clock blues.
Okay, and Roy Brown did Good Rockin' at Midnight. So there you go.
Yeah, but Ruth Brown went for 5, 10, 15
hours. All right, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. I mentioned this because Zappa is the focus of tonight's show. I've got some Zappa experts, myself not among them, but I want to learn. So on the far left, we got Skip Heller. Skip, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here for this.
I know you.
With him.
I know you're a Zappa. I mean, I don't think the word nut would be an uncomplimentary in saying you're a Zappa nut. Would you say?
I've listened to a lot. Yeah.
So that might qualify you as such. So you're here, and we're glad to have you. Next thing we got Barry Hansen, Dr. Demento.
Great to be here, Mr. Fein.
Great to have you here, Dr. D. And this is your Skip's 117th time on the show, but
only my second with the good doctor.
The second with Barry, and Barry's been on about 5 times, and we're mighty happy to have him again. On my left, we got Neil McCabe, who wrote a book on baseball, and he is our utility infielder.
And I'm a big Zappa fan and a big Skip Heller and Dr. Demento fan.
What about me?
Well, Art goes without saying.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But Dr. Demento, I've listened to him since around 1970. Grew up listening to Dr. Demento.
Since I started, my first year.
That's about right.
So this is going to be hard for me to ask questions. I'm just going to let you guys run it. I've actually had some medication today. I didn't expect to be able, truly, I didn't expect to be able to handle this.
Just say no to Art Fein.
Well, this is the first, this is a creepily apropos. I went in for another prostate exam today, third one. Well, that's not good. I mean, in light of Zappa dying of prostate cancer, younger than me, I'm at 11.8. You think that's like a good score? No, you're supposed to have under 4. So we're checking it out. I'm sure it'll be fine. But that's my connection to Zappa tonight, because I don't have too many Zappa
But you're doing
albums.
what Zappa didn't do. He complained that his doctor didn't do a very good job catching it. So you're doing what he wished he'd done.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
And I hope it'll be all right. Now, among us, who has seen Frank Zappa live? 3 out of 4. I've seen him, of course. But Skip, but you were a fanatic, and you saw Elvis, and you were younger than the rest of us. But somehow, did Zappa not come to Philadelphia where you were?
Oh, no, he came to Philadelphia, but by the time I was cognizant of, like, oh, I can go just jump on the subway and go see that, I wasn't really a big fan of the bands that he was going around with. You know, it was past the era of Ruth Underwood and Napoleon Murphy Brock. It was when I was old enough to mount that project of going to see that kind of show with my own money, he was into the chic your booty phase, which was not really...
More comical than you wish?
Yeah, among other things. You know, I found the music to be a lot less challenging. And he was doing a lot less guitar playing as part of the show at that point, until the 1988 band. And frankly, by 1988, I wasn't really listening to very much rock and roll of any sort.
Barry, when's the first time you encountered Frank?
Right around the time the Freak Out album first came out. I had even before that album came out.
What year would that be?
66.
I was 1.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the Freak Out album came out, and I bought a copy, I think the first day it was out, because several people had hyped me to it.
You weren't a doctor then?
No, I was Barry Hansen, a UCLA graduate student in folk music studies.
I see.
In fact, one of the first 2 people that told me about Frank was a fellow student at the UCLA program. Her name was Marina. And then the other person who told me about Frank about the same time was the late Alan Wilson, best known for his work with Canned Heat. And so they got me excited. And I heard the album, and then I'm sure it was the first gig that Frank played in town after the release of the album. I went to see him. It was a rented hall somewhere in the general vicinity of Santa Monica and Western, very close to where we are tonight. And the Mothers played. This was the Mothers of the first album, the Ray Collins group.
What about the freakouts at the Shrine?
Yeah,
and
and
stuff?
yeah, I went to several of those. The Shrine being a little larger venue, those came a bit later, and I saw them at the Whiskey too.
Wow. Well, Neil?
Well, I only saw him once. I was a huge Zappa fan, having grown up in L.A., but I just never got around to seeing him until I had a girlfriend who dragged me to it. It was the apostrophe era. Don't Eat the Yellow Snow.
Oh,
And
see, that was my favorite era.
Oh, it was great. It was great seeing
Ruth
George
Underwood.
Winston and all that.
Oh,
But
George Duke.
George Duke, right? George, boy, what a horrible era.
That would have been trippy.
That would have been. I would.
Yeah, I
I'd
had a
like
little
to
problem with John Tesh's playing in the 1988 band.
George. But anyway, what struck me about the show particularly was how loud Zappa played. But before it was his opening act was a young guy named Tom Waits. And what was horrifying about it was I thought Zappa would have a very hip audience, but they almost lynched Tom Waits. Get off the stage. I was fearing for his life, and he cut his set short. It was at the Santa Monica Civic, but then Zappa came on. It was it's probably the loudest show I've ever heard.
Is that right?
Which surprised me because he's such a musical guy. But boy, did he play loud.
That's what. Okay, go ahead.
Well, Frank Zappa, I think he cooked up all kinds of schemes to enlarge his audience. I mean, basically, he wanted everybody to come in and hear the most complex things that he could possibly dare to play for these people, which got more and more progressive in many ways as he went along. But he realized that he could not draw a massive audience just with this stuff, so he had to come up with other ways to bring them in, whether it was songs that were risque or downright lewd,
Right.
or things that you could hum,
Well,
or,
I mean,
with
the
or with the
best-selling-
freak show. That would
Exactly.
draw
Well,
the people in.
What struck me was he was very anti-drug stance, which was
Oh, yeah.
very unusual in that era. But his songs were filthy, which we all loved, which was great. But I mean, I thought it was odd that he went so far in one direction and not nowhere in the other. You know.
I don't find that a contradiction. As somebody who's not really aligning himself with chemicals.
Right.
I like sex.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if
Well,
you're
usually
going to
they're-
get out of your own head.
The formula was sex and drugs and rock and roll. He just left out the middle element completely, which was very odd in that time.
And when
But
you
he
think
didn't
about
make,
it,
except when he was asked, he didn't make a big deal of
no,
it.
he wasn't doctrinaire
I mean,
about it.
he,
Just would fire you from his band.
Right, true. But he didn't fire you from the audience.
Right, true. Or he would have had a very
Right.
even smaller audience.
Exactly.
no, but I think it's a very interesting thing. You know, very few people were tossed out of that band for their recreational drug usage.
Pick out the first single.
And, you know, and certain people that I know who were through that band said, we passed the audition on chemicals and we stayed in the band on chemicals.
Wow. I might add that my brief experience with Frank was writing a Cashbox cover story for him when Valley Girls was out. That would be 75. something
No,
like
later than that, it's more like 85.
that. Then it wasn't Valley Girls, it was something else. I went on tour to New Orleans with him and then to Phoenix. And Waits was pilloried in each of those
That
places.
would have
too.
been the Don't Eat the Yellow apostrophe era.
Yeah.
Yeah, the album of his that was the biggest commercial success
Right.
at the time it came out was that album.
Well, actually,
So-
Overnight Sensation was the biggest seller in the U.S., which is the one with Dynamo Hum and Dirty Love and...
But Don't
I'm
Eat
the
the Yellow
Slime.
Snow was played on the radio, which was unusual for
Well,
him.
it's kind of an interesting story there, which is Don't Eat the Yellow Snow is actually a suite of about 4 songs.
Yeah, it takes up the whole side.
Yeah,
Of course, those two are consecutive albums, so it's
Yeah.
the same era.
but the interesting thing is some DJ did his own edit.
Oh, really?
Right.
And, you know, like the Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, Nanook Rubs It, St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast, all edited together in a little 4-minute segment. And it did so well that Warner Brothers issued a single
it,
of
just
that edit.
Just that way.
And it charted, not real high, but it charted. His third biggest single, I think, Valley Girl being the biggest.
Barry, what's the name of the CD we got in there for him?
Oh, okay, this is the one
What's the
that's
CD?
called Ronnie and
Ronnie
Kenny.
and Kenny. And what's the
Frank-
number of the cut?
The first,
they can
okay,
get it
let's
prepared.
play 4.
Okay. Let's
the
talk
first
about it.
band that Frank ever made a commercial recording with was with his friends Ronnie and Kenny and Paul Buff and people who hung around a little recording studio.
Is this the one?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the one. And they came out with this record on the Emmy label with this nice bilious pink, hot pink cover, let's call it that. And
I can't
one
see
side was called Break Time, and Frank, we're a little bit unsure as to exactly what the nature of Frank's participation was.
drums.
He may have played drums. I thought he had told me that he had played guitar. In any case, he did tell me for sure, and I wrote it down, that it was the first record that he was on.
Let's take a little listen to very early Frank Zappa. What year would this probably be? 61?
Yeah.
Thereabouts. Let's take a listen to Frank somewhere.
Track 4.
Somewhere on this instrumental. We don't know where. It's track 4.
Let me point out that that was actually the B side of the record. The A side was an imitation of Duane Eddy, who was very big at that time. They do 16 Tons, a song that Duane Eddy had not at that time ever gotten around to doing. And I guess they thought they'd have a hit with it.
They
except
being the Masters.
Yeah, the Masters. The guitarist, probably not Frank, I'm not sure exactly who he was not as good as Duane Eddy, but it's okay.
Okay, so that was
That was the first. He had to start somewhere. He had to crawl before he walked.
How much after the issue of this record did you pick it up? You didn't pick it up when it came out because
No.
you weren't paying any attention
No.
in 61 to him.
I wasn't even here in 61.
Well, they sold
No, I bought that from a dealer at the fabled old Capitol Records swap meet, I think in about 1973. It cost me $35 in VG minus condition.
How much again?
$35.
In 73?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah, you don't want
Yeah.
to know what that record goes for when it occasionally
man,
pops up
because
on
it was really
eBay.
not that established of an underground then. That was the fabled Capitol Records swap meet, which was a really great thing throughout the 70s. I met you or spent time with
Yes.
you at the old National in Sepulveda swap meet, which preceded that swap meet,
Right.
record swap, which is all together now being held out at the Pasadena City College
Right.
on the first Sunday of every month.
And this other
We're going to
record,
cut number 7 right now.
this other record from a couple of years later, also from the Cucamonga Hit Factory. So notice the same pink
Same
label
color.
there. This one I actually bought, I think, at the National in Sepulveda swap meet from Bob Height of Canned Heat fame, who used to sell records.
So
I think it might have been $10 or $15 he got for this
still a
one.
lot of money then. Wow.
Yes.
Hey, Nelda
And
Zappa.
this is Frank and Ray Collins doing their parody of a current song hit of the
Which
early
was?
60s, Hey Paula.
So this is a Nelda.
Right.
Is into the comedy thing pretty early. Let's go with
And it's track 7.
track 7. Let's take a listen to Frank as
Hey, hey, Nelda, I love you true.
Hey, big baby. So what else is new?
I love your complexion.
I have an infection.
Your hair is so fleecy.
And your hair is greasy.
We go together like peaches and cream.
Yeah, that was quite enough of that.
The other side is Surf Along with Ned and Nelda. kind of the same thing at a faster tempo.
Do we know whether Frank was Ned or Nelda? I mean, I think he was.
Well-
I think he was Ned.
Yeah,
Ray Collins
Yeah,
was
Ray
the high
Collins would
voice.
be the
Yeah.
high
Yeah,
voice,
okay.
right.
And now you see, he was into like bitter social commentary already.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
I mean, sort of hateful record. I mean, if you liked Hey Paula, you just, what is this shit? And it's really Frank saying, "You're an idiot." So,
But at around the same period, he could also write a very sweet little song called Memories of El Monte.
Your love of
Which,
my life.
Yeah, which of all his earlier pre-Mothers records was certainly the one that got the most airplay when the Penguins recorded it of Earth Angel fame some years before.
actually, that was one of that would have been their comeback record, really, if they'd had one.
Memories of El Monte was also a song that the early Mothers played the first few times that I saw them, the Freak Out era Mothers. That was always part of their set. It wasn't on the album, but they always played that song. in
And
their
by the
set.
way, for you not local people, the reason to have a memory of El Monte, besides being, of course, the home of Tim Carey, was that that El Monte Legion Stadium was where rock and roll shows were held in Los Angeles till about '64 because rock and roll was against the law in Los Angeles.
I think it lasted till, I think I saw a show there about '69.
But they wouldn't have been
Yeah.
no shows in LA at that time.
Right. Oh, that's right,
The
yeah.
police wouldn't let there be rock and roll shows
Right.
in Los
You
Angeles.
know, one of the people in the house band in the early through the mid '60s was Andy Tesso, who was on here with Cannibal and the Headhunters, and he showed me a great picture of him backing Johnny Guitar Watson.
Wow, pretty cool. So let me jump forward to where we started, which was that you heard about him. By the way, you heard about him in '66 and '67 from friends at UCLA. At some point, veering off Frank for a second, you moved in with the band Spirit,
Oh, yeah.
and that was right around, it must have been right around that time.
That would have been '67. Yeah.
And that's, they too you became pals with?
Right. Canned Heat first. They were my pals. I mean, they were always my pals, but it was the time that I spent hanging out with them was '66 and the first part of '67. Then I was the roadie. Did a trip, about a 3-4 week road trip to Northern California with them.
Wow.
Moving the piano, were
Yeah,
you?
yeah. Schlepping the instruments up and down the old Fillmore where they played. The original Fillmore had no elevator. The ballroom, the famous Fillmore ballroom, was up there on the second floor, up 2 steep flights of stairs. And I had to lug all Canned Heat's amps up those flights of stairs. I earned my pay, my meager pay.
That is
so
really
to
where you
speak,
got your doctorate, wasn't it? Probably you're in
so to speak.
close to music, yeah.
One thing I like about Bob Haidt, he once said, how did you get into records? He said, I found out where records go to die, and which was where old jukebox records were just dumped.
That's right.
And he said, I'll take them. And that's where he got probably your record you got
Yeah.
from it.
Bob was very eloquent.
Oh, yeah.
Bob was the leader of Canned Heat.
Canned Heat, the bear,
The bear.
the big guy. Alan Wilson, who was also a dear friend of mine, was the owl. Whereas Bob was very gregarious and outgoing, Alan stood stock still with his eyes closed through the whole set and sang On the Road Again and Going Up the Country.
Were you with them when they went to Monterey Pop? Because they're
Oh,
in
yeah.
that film.
Yes.
And Alan Wilson is wearing a white shirt. He looks like a student. He doesn't look like a rock singer at
He
all.
never did look like a rock singer.
So so then you discover Frank, and you went to some freakouts, and then did you become acquainted with him at some point?
Yeah. Marina, who first mentioned him to me at UCLA, knew him and told him about me, told him about my interest in rhythm and blues and my collection, and also that I knew something about avant-garde classical music. So Frank expressed an interest in meeting me
Seems
because there
like-
were 2 things we could talk about.
Seems like you were the only 2 people with that interest, possibly at the time.
Yes. So I went to his house and we talked about music. He told me about his drug policy. He said, I don't care what my musicians do, but on stage they have to be straight. I don't care what they do off stage, I remember. But what I remember most, outside of him showing me a bunch of his scores of music that he had written, is the framed letter from Edgard Varese on the wall.
Wow.
That's, I think, what I remember most about that first visit to the Laurel Canyon house, the smaller Laurel Canyon house.
Skip, were you informed about Zappa at first from the Dr. Demento show, or?
Actually, you know, it was how I first became informed about Frank Zappa was that there was a house in the neighborhood where the hippies
Neighborhood of, what neighborhood was that?
lived. It was in South Philadelphia, but there was a house where the hippies lived, and they got evicted, and their possessions were thrown out on the curb. Among them, their records.
Wow.
And they just records sitting out there, and there was a copy of Just Another Band from L.A. In there, and the album cover looked great. So I took this record home, also Trout Mask Replica, and I just freaked. And then not long after, I discovered this guy, and I forget what it was you played, but it was something not on that record. It might have been whatever was the, it was Disco Boy.
Oh, okay.
No, I remember these shows because I used to tape them. When you're 11 or 12 years old, you don't have a large record budget. Sort of like being married.
So you're one of those early Napster guys. You're,
I
it's
did
like,
that too. I had a reel-to-reel tape machine in the 50s.
Oh, as did I.
And taped KTHS out of Little Rock, Arkansas. That's where I got.
KTHS.
Yeah, they played blues late at night.
Wow, because I know Randy's record shop down in Gallatin, Tennessee.
Very similar.
See, I taped you. I taped the WWVA Jamboree, because you know, on a clear night.
Is that a wrestling show? Well, that's the WWF. What is
Country music.
WWVA?
Wheeling, West Virginia. It's where like Conway Twitty was on, and this is when Conway Twitty was on top of the game. It was like second to the Opry at that point. And the other one I taped was the Kay Williams Blues Show, which is why when I was 11 years old, I knew all the words to 60 Minute, man.
Oh, you would have known that from his show too, probably, right?
I don't think you were playing 60 Minute, man, anywhere.
Once in a while.
Yeah, I don't
It
remember.
was more
having heard it
typical
there.
of my first 2 or 3 years of the show.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
right?
when I first listened to Dr. Demento, he was playing music that was unheard of to someone in my generation, stuff like rockabilly and rhythm and blues, because all I knew about was Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles.
Right.
And he would say, here's a song called, Big 10 Inch, and I would go, my God, or this fellow named Jerry Lee Lewis, you might find him of interest.
Well, there I was on this station, which catered to the freak audience
Right.
at the
What
time.
station was that?
KPPC.
It was underground
Free-form,
radio.
progressive, underground, no format whatsoever. It was a commercial station, not a college station,
Right.
but totally free form. The disc jockeys could and did play
Actually, I have a recording
anything.
of Frank on that station with Les Carter.
Right. So I didn't have to play Frank in the early years of my show because they played him all day long on that station.
Oh yeah,
So
let's
my
make the
mission
water
was-
turn black was normal. What
Right,
Dr.
my
Demento
mission-
played was strange.
was to play the earlier stuff.
Right.
Some of which was weird, and as the show went on, the weird stuff took over because I would open the phone line to requests, and the weird stuff quickly came to dominate the request line.
Well, like pull out that T-shirt there. His early. This is when the craze began.
Right.
Sort of-
Through the good graces of Neil
Hold it in
McCabe,
front of
I
you.
am now the proud
Oh,
owner.
you're giving that to
This
you're
is
giving
my
that-
gift to Skip, and it's original KMET. It's got to be 30 years old at least.
Yes, about 30. The
And,
first song that ever really was a hit on my show was Pico and Sepulveda by Felix Figueroa and his orchestra, who was really Freddie Martin.
Right.
And the early listeners to my show just thought that this was tremendously trippy
It was.
and wonderful. 1947 pop song in conga time, all about the streets of Los Angeles. It had been a minor hit here when it came out in 47.
Very insignificant. It was like the original Randy Newman saying 6th Street,
Yeah,
Olympic Bowl.
kind of like,
yeah,
but
right.
that didn't exist yet. So
Exactly.
Pico and Sepulveda appealed to me, and my audience just loved it.
Right.
I
So
had
would you
to
follow
play
it
it
up
every
with
week.
Laguna Orini or something?
Well, there were a few others. The Ventura Boulevard Boogie by Joe Fingers Carr, which I thought was every bit as good, but my audience didn't like it
Well, how
quite
about
as
San
much.
Fernando Valley by Bing
And
Crosby? Did you
that
play
was
that?
good. I played that a lot too. I had Pico and Sepulveda night, first Sunday of every month on KMET, and I play not only Pico and Sepulveda, but other songs about L.A.
But
And
did you
I
play
accumulated
Laguna
a large
Orini?
number of them. Slim Gaylord?
Yeah.
Once or twice, sure.
Pick another record out.
Or Little Red Riding Hood is a good one too.
Now, Skip, your interest is the cuts you brought with on Zappa, Memorex, the Memorex CD. Is there anything we'd like to play right now? Or do you want to
Okay,
go to
well,
the
it's
next show?
interesting. Let's go to the first cut on that, and let me
Yeah.
just set this up with. It's interesting that you played 3 hours past midnight first. Not only did it show fantastic taste on your part,
Well.
but I've read accusations from certain musicians that worked with Frank Zappa, Artie Tripp being paramount among them, that he wasn't really into that R&B stuff. It was just affectation.
4 minutes left. Yeah.
Okay, and what we're going to hear is, first we're going to hear the opening of Too Tired by Johnny Guitar Watson. Then we'll follow that with the opening of a record Frank made about 7 years later called The World's Greatest Sinner, speaking of your Timothy Carey connection. And let's see how similar they are.
Let's go. The Memorex, cut 1. Skip Heller's. That's it. Thank you.
Hundreds of rare R&B 45s. When I first saw it, they were all in piles without any sleeves. He loved them.
Yeah.
All these Flair and Checker and Chess and all the
Yeah,
West
well,
Coast
something I
names
find
especially.
interesting that I really want to point out is he wasn't just copying that. He had the nuances down.
Oh yeah.
By the way, we might have mentioned that the second thing you're talking about, the theme from The World's Greatest Sinner, was more or less a fancy home movie made by Timothy Carey, which has gone on to legendary status now. That the young Frank Zappa, who was a student at the college in the Antelope Valley. I don't remember.
Well, he was never actually really a student.
But
in the
he was an
audience and
unknown
courses,
commodity in 1963, and he scored this film with orchestral stuff as well as the R&B tinged stuff. We're going to go out pretty soon. Dr. Demento picked out another, which happens to be The World's Greatest Sinner.
Which we just heard.
So we'll go back to that Randy and so-and-so CD. And what,
Yes.
what number was it on
Oh,
here?
we just heard the opening of it.
Oh, so this is exactly
Yeah.
the same one.
Yeah, right.
Oh, okay. I thought.
But anyway, this is one of the 2 Zappa 45s that I bought before the Mothers came on the market. So I heard this song and thought it was kind of neat. It's
Oh,
by
really?
Baby Ray and the Ferns, which is Ray Collins from the Mothers, but Frank Zappa wrote both of the tunes. I thought it was kind of neat, but I didn't think it was anything, stupendous.
And we also, Donna Records, of course, was named after Donna. That was, what's his name, from Delphi, right?
Yeah, Bob
Right.
Keane was
Bob-
a subsidiary.
Actually, it was Bob Johnston's label, as I recall. We can go out. Is there anything we want to go out on? Because I still have 3 Hours Past Midnight queued up over there.
I think we should listen to 3 Hours
Go
Past
back,
Midnight.
go
again.
back to the Johnny Guitar Watson Cut 9. And this is a lengthy but not yet finished discussion of Frank Zappa. Retrospective for some people that cared about him quite a bit, and one that knew him quite well. That was Dr. Demento. So thank you very much, Skip Heller. Thanks, Dr. D. Thanks, Neil McCabe. Utility infielder, knows a little about everything, kind of like me.
Thank you for having me on with Neil.
Well, it is a great pleasure to be on with Art.
I agree.
Thank you for having me on with all 3 of you.
And if you really have nothing to do,
No, I love you more.
if you really have nothing to do, next week there'll be part 2 of this. So thank you.
It is 3 hours past midnight, and my baby's nowhere around. Yes, 3 hours past midnight, and my baby's nowhere around. Well, I listened so hard to hear her footsteps, I ain't even heard a sound. Well, I toss and tumble on my pillow, but I